So, hello again and welcome to the first day of Game Days conference here at the Blue Stage. It's my honor to introduce our first speaker, Hynek Svatoš from Bohemia Interactive Simulations. Hynek works as a lead environment artist at the Bohemia Interactive Simulations, and he's focusing on procedural world generation, and that's also the topic of his talk called Creating Earth. So, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Hey guys. Well, there is a few of you, but before I start VBS4, I'm not going to talk too much about VBS4. I don't know a lot about VBS4. I know a lot about the background technology there. And before I start, I have a kind of audience engagement question. How many of you do know Bohemia Interactive Simulations? Emphasis on a simulation is an important bit. Okay. Well, yeah, thank you, guys. If I add that we have nothing in common with the latest Arma Reforger stuff, would you still raise your hand? Oh, okay, 2. Well, that's great. At least something. Enough about this. A bit about me. As I was introduced, Hynek Svatoš. I am, well, the official title is lead environmental artist. That's a kind of my, well, soft skill thingy. By heart, I am a technical artist, and previously I worked in the other Bohemia Interactive, SES software, wargaming, and on some small other projects. Just for those who didn't raise their hand, I'll try to introduce what we do as a Bohemia Interactive Simulations, because we are focused on something which is called serious gaming, and that's basically using game dev technologies for education, not for entertainment. The issue regarding the name is that we were once a part of a Bohemia Interactive studio. The company was founded as a child company of Bohemia Interactive Studio in Australia in 2001. The product is VBS, which is a virtual battle space. It's used for simulating a lot of things, mostly for governmental agencies. Mainly armies, but we do stuff for the first responders, for firefighters. I believe Red Cross was using us. In the beginning, we were based on Operation Flashpoint, Arma 2. That's why those of you who have ever played those games, you might find some assets familiar to you. But currently, with the latest version of VBS4, we are running on our proprietary technology, and I will explain what the technology brings to us. As I said, we work mostly for governmental agencies, mostly for armies. We are working currently with 60 countries. Those are strictly NATO or NATO-friendly countries. So there is currently something like 400 of us. We have offices all around the world, from the States, where we are in Orlando, Pittsburgh. We have a lot of the content guys are in Farnborough in UK. We have offices in Japan, Seoul, and of course here in Košice. My majority of our staff is currently based in Prague. There is something like 200 of us. And as we were part of the Bohemia Interactive Studio, something like 10 years ago, we were sold to an investment company, but 2 years ago we were bought by BAE Systems, and currently we are under BAE Systems, which, well, in a nutshell, it gives us kind of more time for R&D and looking deeper in the tech. So for us, it's currently a nice basis. Environmental team. There's 4 of us. Please bear that number in mind once I'll be describing what we actually do and what we need to tackle. Currently, in these days, we are fully remote. There are 1 guy is from Italy, second one is from Romania. The third one is still in Czech Republic, but he doesn't care to travel to the office. Mostly what we do is we create a content as environmental team, but with a bit of a twist because of the scale, and we tune the settings for a lot of things. And the second main part of what we do is R&D, because we are not just trying to, well, fill the world with the assets, but we are as well trying to find the way how to make our life easier. Those up there, those are our products. VBS4, it's a simulation stuff. VBS Blue IG, it's basically a renderer. Mantle EMT, it deals with terrain stuff. But what I'm here and the part of the team I am, the team what I'm part of is VBS Blue, and that's basically a backbone for all of these technologies. The VBS Blue is a word provider, which I will explain a bit later, and the renderer. So it's not just what makes the pictures, but it's what even creates the word. Just to show you how big complexity of what we tackle is, then of course, as we started from Arma franchise, we have a FPS view. You can run around with the soldiers. You have that fidelity of every grass clutter, of stands, buildings, and others. But if in our engine you would hold the arrow back or S, then you can fly away. You'll get into Japan. It doesn't really matter. But we have the airplane view, so you can seamlessly come from the FPS view to an airplane view, and if you would hold that back arrow even more, you would get, and you would see the whole world. So, and there is a seamless transition. We have infinite viewing distance, and we have to somehow describe and make assets to depict the whole world, which consists of forests. We have a lot of forests. A lot of world is a forest. This is Norway, I believe. We have deserts, we have jungles, so there is a lot of natural stuff, and there is a lot of variety in the natural stuff, and we need to deal with everything from the surface, from the mud, sand, stone, to kind of plants, grass, bushes, trees. Of course, the board is not just composed of nature, it's composed of urban areas as well, so we have a way how to, in some simplified, some less simplified ways, to visualize small urban areas. We can visualize large urban areas. This is San Francisco, and each of that box is an individual geometry representing the individual house in San Francisco. So sometimes the scale is what we are fighting the most, because we need to depict everything to at least geospecific detail. Of course, the urban areas have some life to it, so we simulate the nightlife to some degree. We have seasons. The world is complicated. Currently, these are just 4. We usually aim for to 2 to 4, because there are regions of the world where you have just wet and terribly wet seasons. In our case, we have spring, summer, autumn, winter. We can go even crazier if we want. We can go early summer, early spring, early summer if we need, but we usually don't go that way, because it means more work, because a lot of assets we still need to hand create. Weather. There is, of course, the part of the world is weather. We have rain, from kind of light drizzle to thunderstorms. The whole world has to change according to it. You need to have the puddles, and everything. We have snow, so we are able to cover the world in the snow. The snow is, I'd say, volumetric. It changes the terrain, so you can have from 10 centimeters to 5 meters of snow, and it has to compensate for the buildings. This is not the latest screenshot. Currently, we are able to make even the snow on top of the buildings. Clouds and winds. Again, it's part of the world. We have volumetric clouds. We can depict any clouds, from this stratocumulus thingies to overcast to whatever you can imagine. We have day-night cycle, which might sound kind of easy, but the issue is that wherever you are on the world, the day-night cycle is different. The length of the golden hour is different. The color is different. So, of course, we need to calculate with that as well. And we have an authored map, so not everything is procedural. Of course, our clients or ourselves, we can create the maps in the traditional level art way. You put the assets, you make it nice. And it's quite often what people, the clients or our guys in the design do, that they take the basis we create for them, and they will add additional layer of what's necessary for the trainings that are required to be proceeded in our game. Malleability. As the word is complex, another layer of complexity is that everything can change, especially when you train with the soldiers. They have a tendency to break things. They have a tendency to throw bombs. What our terrain can do, it's still not as good as I would like it to be. Buildings disappear, the trees disappear, but currently it's enough, and we know that we can achieve more, and hopefully we will move there in the future. But what I'd like to show in this is, yeah, everything can change. The terrain can change because of the creators. Buildings have to disappear, and the trees have to kind of adjust to it. Our latest addition is we are able to leave physical tracks in the snow. So wherever you have soldiers, you have vehicles, they can leave depressions in the snow, which are seen through the server, and everybody who is in the session sees them. So they are persistent. And it's not just an effect which would be kind of trailing after the unit, but everybody sees them, and it has actually effect on the simulation if necessary. That's kind of what we have to work with. And on the output side, as we work mostly with a military tech, of course, we have a visible light, what you see kind of regularly. We have a night vision, which is kind of easy because it's just a subset of the visual light. But we as well have thermal imaging, and that requires another layer of complexity because you need to understand materials, their thermal capacity, how they behave, how the temperature changes through the day, through the night, and how basically it should look like. Our latest TI is quite accurate, real-world reality. And the last addition we had is synthetic aperture radar. Whatever that is, it looks cool, and it's a tech used by militaries as well. There are things which I don't have a picture for, but we still need to deal with them. We have multiple data sources. We usually base a lot of stuff on GIS, that's a geographic information system. So basically, satellite map data, vector data, describing roads, buildings, and other things. We are able to deal with the third-party content. We can plug in our system, for example, Bing 3D data, and you can sort of have a flight simulator in our game where you can fly with other fancy planes than just the flight sim has. I don't know, you might heard about the Black Shark AI, which is actually a provider of the content for flight simulator, but we can plug in their data in our system as well. And of course, as I've been speaking about, we have hand-created stuff. The other issue is that usually the sources come in different quality. We quite often don't have a control over that. So sometimes we have a data which describes just 40 meters per pixel. Sometimes we have a data which is kind of huge, and it describes up to half a meter per pixel. So sometimes our satellite map data might be 100 megs. Sometimes our satellite data might be 1 terabyte. And it all has to process. And hopefully the last level of complexity, almost, I have here is the output. We don't output just to a desktop, which is kind of the regular thing. You can see the guy sitting at the computer. They're most probably training something like how to behave in a convoy or what to do in what situation. But as well, we have a dome projection. We can plug it into VR. We have an AR. And of course, there are custom rigs where you have, I don't know, a striker, and you have the screens which represents the views out of the striker, and we can render to those and adjust accordingly. So, in a nutshell, our challenges are various inputs. There is a lot of real-world data we ingest. There is a lot of proceduralism we try to kind of maintain, and there might be a lot of handmade stuff. We have no real control over the input data because quite some data we provide, but a lot of data is provided by customers for themselves because they have access to better data, satellite map imagery, and whatnot. Malleability. Everything changes in our engine, so we have to accommodate for that. Terrain, the assets can be destroyed, the weather changes, and the scale of the usage is from the FPS to orbital. So if I would put it down into one word, what we face, that's scale. And if you kind of compare what all I've been talking about, and that there is just 4 of us, on the environmental side, there is a lot of programmers helping us with that, but our challenge is hopefully quite obvious. It's an introduction, and now more to the technical part. This is the last nice picture I have, the word. This is the worst picture I have. This is the backend of our Word. It's called Plugin Config Manager. But what it does, and it basically describes the flow of the data through the Word provider, where on the left side you have the inputs, you have kind of our data, user input data. They can be anything, rasters, vectors, whatever we can read, mostly from a GDAL library. In the middle, those boxes are usually called providers, and they get the data and they process it in some way. We have something like albedo provider, which creates the terrain. We have crater provider, which will put the craters on the terrain and invalid the buildings and the vegetation. We have road provider, which will draw the roads on the surface, and others. And on the output side, it's not just the rendering output. Actually, our renderer is just the tall gray box on the right side, but the rest can be binarization. So we can pre-process the data so it's faster, and we can put it out in a binarized format. We can plug it in actually any other renderer if we adjust to it. So this is what the Word is based on. And what we do as an environmental team in regards to that is we feed the boxes. Basically, that's majority of our work. We create assets for albedo provider needs textures. Building provider as well, but there are other things, and we provide with the configs. So for biomes, I'll be talking a bit later about. We provide how everything spawns in regards to where the biome is. And the second part of our work is R&D, because we try to improve on those boxes. We try to make our life easier, as well we try to make the world nicer, which is, well, struggle, but we iterate and we are improving things all the time. I'm going to talk about these few things, which are kind of the basic building blocks of the world, just to illustrate the complexity of what we face. I'm not really expecting you would understand everything I'll be talking about, but it's just more to illustrate where the proceduralism comes and what part of our work it is, and where the traditional artistry comes. Because, for example, biomes, which I will start with, we have up to 255 biomes. They are defined by a 8-bit raster image. 255 is because 0 is void, so there is no biome. Here you can kind of see our testing area, which at least to some degree describes our biomes. And this is somewhere in the middle of Kazakhstan, and it's I believe 640 kilometers wide and 300 kilometers tall. So for our auto tests, we have some area. We have those first 50 biomes, which describe general world biomes, kind of geospecific biomes. The others are biomes for our insets. So when there is something special about the inset is something what we produce to a customer, which describes just a smaller part of the world, and they need some specificity to it, then they can use those. In regards of the biomes, as I said, there is about 50 of those which describe the world, and we have another 15 to 20 which are the generic ones. So we have something like temperate biome for the Europe, but we inherit from it, and we have a temperate biome, but then we inherit for it for the Europe. So there are specific trees, there are specific grass, and we made our life on one side easier, so we avoided the craziness of filling everything in every biome, but on the other side we made our life quite more complex because there is a lot of inheritance, and it's not just inheritance from the vertical side, kind of having stuff from the higher up hierarchy biome, but as well horizontal, which then relates to surfaces, but yeah. Just to illustrate our lovely tools, this is a biome tuner. On the left side, you can kind of see the list of the biomes. In the middle, you can see the list of the surfaces. And on the right side is the settings for the surface in a given biome, inherited from another given biome, and the surfaces can inherit in between each other. And for each surface, there is more definition per season, per population. What are the surfaces I've been talking about? Surfaces, basically, you can imagine meadow, you can imagine conifer forest, broadleaf forest, mixed forests, and others. It can be concrete for the urban areas. It can be mud, mire, whatever you can come up with. And again, we have 255 surfaces per biome. Again, it's a raster image, which is then multiplied by the biome. We have a possible definition per season, but each surface is sort of, it consists of populations. And if you would read them from bottom up, then first we have a rock, sand, grass, snow. Whenever snow is a bit complicated, bush, tree, and they cover each other. So in a way, you might never really see a rock surface, but we have a definition. You will most probably see the rock surface on a really steep hills because there is no snow, no grass, no trees are growing. So we have a settings for that. But again, you can just say, I just want to see a rock, or I don't want to see. Usually for the meadow, you would see no trees, no bush, but you would see the grass with the grass clutter. And for those surfaces, we provide hand-authored assets to a degree, hand-authored. For trees, we need tree models. We need some macro settings for it. For bushes, again, bush models. For grass, there you are coming to a territory where we need textures. So you have a texture for the grass surface, and then you have a grass clutter. Same goes for the sand and rock. Because the surfaces are sort of generic, you cannot really get a good macro detail out of those. Then there is a concept of satellite soil map, and the soil map is something what we thought is a great idea, because usually when you work with satellite map imagery, it's full of a noise you don't really want in there. There are cars, there are tree canopies, there are people, there are roads, and nothing of that you really want to have in your base data. So if you want to have a forest, usually in a forest on the ground, you don't have a tree canopies which are on the satellite map imagery. Or if you have a plowed field, then there is not anything green, but everything is a soil color. Issue is, it's really impossible to get these. There are some examples of universities doing stuff like that, mostly life science universities. On the other side, the satellite map imagery, it's really easy to get, well, relatively easy, but it consists all of that noise. And most often, it as well consists of the atmospheric lighting, and we use that as an albedo. So once you have a lighting in an albedo, then you need to remove the lighting, and processing it for really large areas and big amount of data is complicated. So our current solution right now is leveraging the surfaces. I've introduced 2 slides or 1 slide ago to avoid the weird textures in the forest. So the surface map classification is something that you can get. It's not always great, but I believe that in close future it might get improved using machine learning, because it's kind of easy to classify, okay, this is a forest, this is a field, this is an urban area. So we are able to get a good surface maps, but to get the macro detail we are missing, then we mix it with a satellite map imagery, and we can adjust the satellite map imagery. So when there is a rock, when there is a sand, we can kind of take the color from the satellite map imagery because it's a bare soil what's there, and the color is kind of true to the reality. But when there is a forest, then we need to adjust to it. So in the end, we are usually we might take the whole color from it, or we have a color invariant version where we just take the detail. So think about it as a grayscale image we can multiply over our surface. So we get that global data detail to make the world more believable. Just to show an example, this is, if you look at, I believe, Spain, without any satellite map imagery added to it, so it's okay-ish. But if you add the additional layer of satellite map data tuned accordingly, then you get much better image, more richer and kind of more truthful. As we established, we have surfaces. On those surfaces, we need to have a vegetation. That comes to a moment. Till this point, it's mostly about proceduralism, about configs, about tuning parameters and textures. But right now, the vegetations, they are regular assets. The issue with our vegetation is we need to be geospecific. So our current database has something like 250 unique vegetation species, which equals to 1,400 unique models. Think about growth variant like a solitary or forest version. Think about the age. We have usually young, early mature, and mature plants and seasons, because not everything is evergreen, and even the evergreen plants kind of change through the seasons. To create this and don't grow crazy, we use a tool called Botanica 3D, which is, if you have experience with SpeedTree, SpeedTree is still a software where you can touch every branch and tune it as you feel like, but Botanica is more based on botanical terms, so you more kind of set up how often it splits the branches, how it reaches to the sun, how it kind of dislikes each other. But in the end, the advantage for us, this is how the Botanica looks like, but the advantage for us as it's a Houdini for plants, it's a node-based system. Those nodes can be tuned. They can be tuned by a script. They can be tuned in a lot of automatic fashion. The Botanica itself is XML-based, so you can find stuff there and you can throw another layer of automation on top of it. And whenever we improve on something, we can just regenerate all the plants, which nobody is really happy because it's about the 30 gigs everybody needs then download in their SVNs. But yeah, that's life. But generally, the disadvantage of Botanica and the plants we have, there are no hero plants. We don't really obsess about the assets in general. We just need to have an asset which is an asset. It's a generic spruce, and it's good enough. We are not going to spend 2-3 months talking about how the tree in the middle of the level should look like, and if this branch is under a correct angle. I can do that. I did that a lot in the wargaming, where we had something like half a year on creating one level. But yeah, the levels in wargaming were 9 square kilometers. I believe the world or the earth and the surface of the earth is something like 150 million square kilometers. So the scale is a bit different. As you might notice, we have buildings. Our buildings are sort of shoeboxy. They don't have doors, but on the other side, the input for our buildings currently is just a vector footprint. So based on that footprint, based on where the building is, we kind of assign a template to it, and the template describes how the walls look like, how the roof looks like. We can then play with the colors of the roofs, because usually Czech villages have red roofs, and it's attribute-based, so it can be data-driven. So if we would get the data which would drive it, we can drive it through the data. But what we provide as artists is kind of settings for those templates and textures. The last bit I'm going to talk about here are roads. I'm not really sure I managed to grab the right picture, but I tried it to be Košice. I'm not really sure if it's true or not. Roads are sort of simple. We have a vector data. We source them from OSM data or from clients' data, and they usually carry information in regards of number of lines. Sidewalks as well, sometimes crosswalks and others. Our input is textures, and the interesting bit about this is the result is not an additional geometry, but we bake them into terrain. Our terrain is sort of pixel-based, so every pixel of the terrain, whenever there is not too many of those, can carry a color and a height map information. So we can do anything with the surface we have and put any amount of data on top of it, and except the kind of refactoring time, it will perform still the same. I hope that through this, I kind of described what is tempting for me, because when I was always thinking about a game I'd like to create. I'm a game developer for the last almost 20 years. I was always had a sort of a dream of creating a walking simulator where you will be able to go anywhere and access any building and kind of do anything you feel like. And in BI Sim, I believe I got the closest to it ever, because we are generally creating the world. We are thinking about how to improve of this. We know that the list of improvement is infinite. We can do better everything, but we need to strike the balance between the visuals, so it looks nice and it's sufficient for the purposes, but on the other side, the applicability, because I have a great setup in Houdini, which will generate a procedurally created building based on a modular system. It will color the roof. It will throw on top of some vertex color. It will do a procedural AO. But it takes 10 seconds to create one building. And if you need to create 200,000 of buildings for San Francisco, it doesn't really work. It might work for some of the smaller insets we provide, but usually what we deal currently with is the whole world, and so we are always looking for the ways how to automate stuff, how to improve on the things, but in a way that it will be performant and that we actually can process it, because right now it takes 1 or 2 days to create all the buildings around the world based on the data we have. But if it would be 10 seconds per buildings, not all the servers of Azure would really help us. So we are looking for a scalable solutions, and yeah, that's a world of ours where we try to create the whole world. I find it fun because, as I said, I'm a technical artist. I believe a lot of, the 3 guys of mine are happy with that as well, because whenever you are not creating the individual asset and you don't obsess about the detail, you don't obsess about the stories, you don't spend 3 months on one asset making all those small stories around it so you can then be proud of this thing. Here you can change one parameter and it will change the whole world. So it's a bit the other way around, but it's, for me, satisfactory in a similar way that by tuning as little as much, the impact is as big as possible. Thank you for you paying attention to me. Hopefully nobody fell asleep. If you have any questions, I am happy to answer those. And thank you.
Okay, I believe that we have one question here over Slido, but you guys can ask your questions either on Slido or just raise your hand and I'll come with mic.
It's a traditional question.
Okay, so I'll just read this one. Does the war in Ukraine or Israel affect your work in any way? For example, do you have any specific requirements in a particular area of these countries?
Honestly, I don't know, because that's not a part of a company I am part of, but we provide simulators for NATO countries, for NATO armies, and the NATO armies provide training to Ukraine, so that might be an answer for that. The consequence, which kind of everybody probably understands, is after all these events, states and governments kind of started to think more and putting more money in their Ministry of Defense budgets. So I skidded around it, but I believe you can.
Any question in the audience? Come on, guys, don't be shy.
Yeah, anything.
Anyone? Okay, I have one. How do you incorporate real world data and scenarios to enhance the training experience for the military personnel from the point of view of creating the world?
Well, it depends, because usually there are requests sometimes which are related to what the armies do need to train. I cannot probably be really specific, but it then might come that we need to improve on some of the technology to provide more accurate depiction of the specific part of the world. It usually comes with that they will provide us with a better data, or they can pay for better data, and then we can improve on it. So for us, it usually means that we can focus on one part of the world that the contract is talking about, and we can improve on it, because our world, for us, kind of, the Europe is the most developed from the point of view of the art. But if there is one of our biggest clients is American Army, so if they have something there, then we have then more resources to throw at the specific part of the world, and we can make it nicer. And through that, we kind of iterate the whole world, and because we cannot really focus on one thing.
And we have another one on Slido. So what are technical specifications of handmade 3D models that you use?
Technical specification of handmade 3D models. I'm here mostly to talk about the environmental art. There is another part of our company which is content creation. They do tanks, they do characters, they do the traditional assets. So I tend to say we do double A quality content. It's the same as for the trees. We are not aiming for the tank, the quality of work of the tanks. We don't spend 3 months on creating a tank and obsessing about the stories and obsessing about all the detail, but the quality of the content is good. If you would want specific numbers, I believe there is something like 50 to 100,000 triangles per a tank, and 4K textures and others. So in environmental art, the trees are sort of not really so detailful, or we are talking about 15,000 triangles and several 1K textures, because we have a lot of trees. We need to actually switch to imposters quite quickly. And if we are talking about the textures, we alter everything in 2 or 4K resolution. I don't know if it's satisfactory answer, but I don't have better.
Okay, we have another one. Is there a way to incorporate animals to your project, or is it absolutely impossible?
We do have animals. We have snakes for sure, I believe. We have cows. Sometimes the cows think they are soldiers and they can deploy a parachute, but that's the different issue. But yes, there are animals, and if somebody wants animals because of the training, we have some base subset. And if they want something crazy, like, I don't know, crocodiles jumping at you from the shallow rivers, if you pay for it, we are happy to implement those.
Okay. Have you thought about using AI to help generate things more efficiently to some degree?
Yes, I slightly touched on that theme, mostly with surface classification. With the AI, the issue is, with the 3D, the results currently are not optimized. So I believe we sometimes use AI or as a starting point for textures sometimes. But again, a lot of stuff we do is malleable. So even if we create asphalt texture, then we usually create it mostly in Substance Designer, because we then layer on top more and more stuff to be able to say, okay, this is a pure asphalt, this is an asphalt with the skid marks and others. So to a degree, yes, and I'm waiting till the point where the actually AI will free us from the crazy work of a lot of 3D artists, and that's being a 3D scanner. So I'm looking forward to that moment when we can focus on art more than focusing on copying one-to-one things. But currently, I don't think we are there yet, and the AI and the corporations, it's a complicated theme.
And another one, how does the connection between the biomes work? And it's gone. Okay, what program language programs do you use for generation?
There is no programming language. If you will be talking about the programming language of the company, we are C++ based. Our designers work in something called SQF, but they are transferring to C#. Most of the stuff we put there is XML based, so it's usually markup language if you want a name for the language. So, and partially for experiments, we use ChiScript, but it was just the easiest thing to implement because it's C++ easy to put stuff in. But we don't use it really for the product. We use it for testing. Like if we have a vector data through the ChiScript, we can spawn stuff along the vector data. And then we usually think hard how to implement it in C++ so it's performant.
Okay, back to the biomes again. How does the connection between the biomes work? Is it somehow automatically blended, or are there any straight borders?
It's blended. Basically, the surfaces in between each other are blended. There is kind of a transition period, and the same goes for the biomes. So when one biome kind of ends, there is a transition to other biome. It's set somewhere, but it's hundreds of meters or hundreds or lower kilometers. So the transition is not harsh. There is not kind of length of ice and length of desert.
Okay, do you try to optimize world for air combat, and for areas where ground forces are used, handmade maps are used?
Do you try to optimize world for air combat? To a degree, it's not that we would optimize, but the technology is designed in a way that it will provide you with the lot of the terrain that is enough for you from the distance you are looking at it. So if you'll be in an airplane, you'll be looking at something like 10, 12 lot of the terrain. And for example, the buildings would disappear and they would be just baked in the terrain, as we can bake stuff in the terrain. So we just bake roof colors in the terrain. And if you are running there kinda in FPS, then it's a traditional game. We have settings. So if you have low power machine, you can run it on really low. You will probably see 3 imposters 10 meters in front of you, but it will work.
Okay, any other questions? Okay.
No, please.
So you mentioned a couple of times that there are only 4 of you in the team. So
Yes.
Is it like hard to find colleagues or like in this area, or is like are the 4 of you enough for the job?
The honest answer is, when I was hired into BISIM, I was hired as a lead environmental artist to be a lead. So it means build a team and bother with Jira and spreadsheets and other things. And first year, I did most of the art, and I had a lot of interviews. I believe I was the second least successful guy in a matter of how many people were coming and how many of I have hired. Only the QA are worse than me. So it's a combination of factors, because we do a really specific sort of art where you need to be kind of keen on proceduralism. You need to kind of be that sort of artist when you kind of get fed up with the asset when it's on that 80%. It's good enough, but then you don't want to spend another 80% of time on the last 20%, and you will just want to go forward. And partially it's as well the love of proceduralism, because what I can offer mostly is that one parameter which will change the world. So yeah, it's complicated because I'm looking for a specific kind of a guy. I'm looking for a seniorish guy because we are small, so we cannot really afford to train juniors. And we are not a AAA title, so it again kind of lowers the amount of people because everybody thinks about the portfolio, which I do all the time. And this is a different play field. Welcome.
Okay, any other question? Okay, if not, thank you for your presentation. Thank you guys for your time, for coming for this talk. I guess that the coffee break is already running, so go grab a coffee and come back in a few for our next presentation. Thanks.
Cheers.